Hello everyone, this is John Hashmat and welcome to Physics Simply. In this video I will be solving the paper 2 exam for October-November 2023 variant 3. So let's get started. Question 1 says how many of the quantities shown are scalars? We have mass, density and energy. So the answer is C, 3. Question 2 says a train is on a straight track. The graph shows how a quantity y varies with time. Which statement can be true? The train is stationary and y represents the distance from the last station. Yes, for a distance time graph, an object at rest would appear a horizontal line. 2 says the train is moving and y represents the distance from the last station. No, if it's moving then there must be a speed, so the gradient must be anything other than 0, so this is wrong. 3 says the train is stationary and y represents the speed of the train. No, if it is stationary the y-axis should have a 0 value for an object with speed 0 if it is stationary. 4 says the train is moving and y represents the speed of the train. Yes, if it is a constant speed. So it is 1 and 4 only, so the answer is B. Question 3 says a diagram shows a speed-time graph for a moving object. Which description of the object's motion is correct? So this is a speed-time graph, which means the gradient is the acceleration. So we have an increasing speed that's accelerating, not decelerating, and the gradient is decreasing because the line is getting more horizontal, so it's a decreasing acceleration, so the answer is A. Question 4 says the mass of air hitting the blades of a wind turbine each second is 1.5 times 10 to the power of 4 kilograms, and we have the time 1 second. The speed of the air is 4 meters per second. The density of the air is 1.2 kilograms per meter cubed. So we have mass, time, speed, and density. Which row gives the volume of the air hitting the blades each second and the kinetic energy of the air hitting the blades each second? So the volume can be calculated as mass divided by density. So we have 1.5 times 10 to the power of 4 divided by 1.2. That gives an answer of 12,500. And for the kinetic energy, we calculate half mv squared. So we have half multiplied by 1.5 times 10 to the power of 4 multiplied by 4 squared. And that gives an answer of 120,000 joules. So for 12,500 we can approximate that to 13,000, and for the kinetic energy we have 120,000, so the answer is B. Question 5 says an object moves in a circle at constant speed. Which statement about the force needed on the object is correct? So if we are moving in a circle, there is a change in direction, which means there is a change in velocity. So a centripetal force is needed. So the force is away from the center. No, it is towards the center. A force in the direction of motion. Again, no. A force towards the center. Yes. That keeps the object moving in a circle. No force is needed. No, because there is an acceleration. So there must be a resultant force. So the answer is C. Question 6 says a uniform rod rests on a pivot at its center. The rod is not attached to the pivot. Forces are then applied to the rod in 4 different ways as shown. The weight of the rod can be ignored. Which diagram shows the rod in equilibrium? Which means there is no resultant moment and no resultant force. So we have here the 100 Newton causes a moment clockwise and the other 100 Newton causes an anti-clockwise moment. So these will balance since the pivot is at the center. So equal forces and equal distances means equal and opposite moments. But these forces are balanced by the reaction force from the pivot. So this object will be in equilibrium. But in B we have the 2 forces pulling upwards and the rod is not attached. So the rod will actually move upwards. It will leave the pivot, so this is not in equilibrium. And in C we have this is a clockwise moment and this is a clockwise moment. There is no anti-clockwise moment to balance them. In D we have these forces will cancel out as forces and as moments, and we are left with a clockwise moment and a force downwards. So D is not in equilibrium, C is not in equilibrium, and the answer is A. Question 7 says a car of mass 1,200 kilograms is traveling along a straight horizontal road. Which impulse is needed to accelerate the car from 5 meters per second to 10 meters per second? So the impulse is equal to the change in momentum, which is the mass multiplied by the change in velocity. So we multiply 1,200 by the final velocity 10 minus the initial velocity 5, and that gives an exact value of 6,000 Newton seconds. So the answer is A. Question 8 says a mass bounces up and down on a steel spring. The diagram shows the mass and the spring at different points during the motion. So this is the highest point, mass moving downwards. Lowest point means that it is at rest. Mass moving upwards, this is in the middle. The maximum height and the lowest height, this means that the object is stationary. At which point is the least energy in the gravitational potential store of the mass? So that would be the lowest height, so the lowest point. And at which point is the most energy in the elastic store of the spring? The most energy would be when the spring was most extended, so it would be also the lowest point, so the answer is D. Question 9 says a boy uses a rope to pull an object of mass m up a slope. The rope is parallel to the slope, the tension in the rope is constant and of value f. The object moves a distance d along the slope and rises through a height h. How much work is done by the boy? So the boy is doing the force which is inclined and moving the distance d, which is also inclined. So we need the parallel forces. So it's F times d. So the answer is A. Question 10 says a microwave oven is rated at 900 watts. Which statement correctly describes the meaning of this value? So it is 900 joules are transferred every second. Yes, that is energy per unit time. That is the definition of power, which we have the unit watts here for. 900 amperes are transferred every second. No, that's current over time. Volts are transferred every second. No. Ohms are transferred every second. Ohms are not transferred, so the whole sentence is wrong. So the answer is A. Question 11 says an object is immersed in a liquid of density rho. The pressure at this depth due to the liquid is P. The gravitational field strength is G. What is the equation for the depth h of the object? So the pressure in the liquid is equal to rho GH. So if we want to calculate h, we divide P by rho and G. So it's P divided by rho G. So the answer is C. Question 12 says a sealed bottle of constant volume contains air. The air in the bottle is heated by the sun. What is the effect on the average speed of the air particles in the bottle and the average distance between them? So if it is heated, the speed of the particles increases, but since we have a constant volume, the separation between the molecules will be the same because the gas is not allowed to expand. Otherwise, it would expand if we have a container of variable volume or if they are free to move. So the answer here is D. Question 13 says, in an experiment to investigate the relationship between the volume of a sample of air and its pressure, the volume of the sample is decreased and its pressure is measured continuously. Curve X on the graph shows the results that would be expected for a fixed mass of air at constant temperature. Curved Y shows the results that are obtained in this particular experiment, which means something went wrong in the experiment or there was an error in the experiment. So from X to Y, the pressure actually decreased. So we are looking for reasons for the decrease in pressure. Which row shows two possible reasons why curve Y is different from curve X? So we have here the temperature of the air increases. That would increase the pressure, not decrease the pressure. So increases is wrong. The temperature decreases, yes. Temperature decreases, yes. Air leaks into the container. That would also increase the pressure, not into. It would be out of the container. So the common choice is D. Question 14 says a student splashes water onto her face. Here are three statements about the effects. The water uses energy to evaporate. The water gains energy from the student. The face of the student cools. Which statement are correct? All of those are correct because evaporation needs energy to break bonds between molecules and it gains that energy from the student and this causes a cooling effect. So all sentences are true, P, Q, and R. So the answer is D. Question 15 says 4 containers each contain water. More water at the same temperature is added to each container. From which container does water now evaporate more slowly? So if we have the same temperature and the same type of liquid and same room, that would need a smaller surface area in order to have a lower rate of evaporation. This is the one which has a smaller surface area going up. So this is the area at the start, this is the area at the end, for example. So the answer would be C. Question 16 says a cupboard is placed in front of a heater. Air can move through a gap under the cupboard. Which row describes the temperature and the direction of movement of air in the gap? So if hot air rises above the heater, then cold air must replace it from underneath the cupboard. So it would be cool air under the cupboard. And the direction of flow is not away from the heater, it is towards the heater to replace the lost hot air moving upwards. So the answer here will be B. Question 17 says light diffracts when it enters a telescope. This causes the image to blur slightly. The amount of diffraction depends on the diameter of the hole through which the light enters the telescope and the wavelength of the light. Which combination for diameter and wavelength will result in the sharpest image, which means less blurring and less diffraction? So for the diameter we need a small diameter and the long wavelength for the gap to be small compared to the wavelength. So the answer is C. Question 18 says a diagram shows a transverse wave. Which row identifies the amplitude and the wavelength of the wave? So this is the amplitude and the wavelength is the distance between two corresponding points like the crests here. So the distance S is the wavelength and P is the amplitude. So P amplitude, S wavelength. So the answer is B. Question 19 says a diagram shows the effect of a prism on white light. Some light is reflected on striking the prism and some is refracted and disperses to form a spectrum. What happens if monochromatic light is used instead of white light? The light changes color as it passes through the prism. No. The light forms a brighter spectrum. No. There is no reflected light. No, there will be a reflected ray. There is no dispersion because this is only one frequency, not many frequencies, so the same speed. So the answer is D. Question 20 says a diagram shows a ray of light incident on a plane mirror. The angle between the ray and the mirror is 35. So the angle of incidence would be equal to 90 minus 35. So that would be 55 degrees. The ray is reflected by the mirror. What is the angle of reflection? The angle of reflection is equal to the angle of incidence, so it would be 55 also. So the answer is B. Question 21 says a thin converging lens in a camera produces a real image on a photosensitive surface as shown. At which position is the image of the top of the object formed? So this is the top of the object. From this point we have these rays, this one and this one. This one continues to reach point C and the upper ray also reaches point C. So the image will be at point C. Question 22 says light is traveling through air. It strikes a glass block at an angle of incidence 45 degrees. The glass has a refractive index of 1.4. What is the angle of refraction of light as it enters the glass? So we can use the equation refractive index is equal to sine the angle in air over sine the angle in the medium, which is the glass here. So 1.4 is equal to sine 45 over sine the required angle of refraction. So we move this to the top here and we divide by 1.4 instead. And then we use a calculator to calculate the inverse sine. So we calculate sine 45 over 1.4 and then we press shift sine answer. That would give an angle of refraction of 30.3364 approximately, which we can approximate further to 30 degrees. So the answer is B. Question 23 says which row gives approximate values for the speed of sound in copper, which is a solid, water, which is a liquid, and air, which is a gas. So sound moves the fastest in solids and less speed in liquids and even less speed in gases. So the answer is A. Question 24 says which metal can be attracted by a magnet? It must be a magnetic material, so not zinc, not lead, iron, yes, not copper, so the answer is C. Question 25 says the diagram shows an electric circuit. In which direction do free electrons flow around the circuit and what quantity does the ammeter measure? In this case, the current is moving out of the positive terminal clockwise and the electrons always flow in the opposite direction, so the electrons are flowing anti-clockwise. So it's A or B. And the quantity measured by the ammeter is the current. So is it the charge passing each point in the circuit per unit time? Yes, that is the definition of current. So the answer is A. It is not the total charge, it is the charge per unit time. Question 26 says which substances both contain large quantities of free electrons? So we have aluminium and glass. Glass is a poor conductor, it must be a good conductor. Copper and water. Copper and nylon, not nylon because it's a poor conductor also. Silver and gold are both good conductors, both metals, so the answer is D. Question 27 says resistance wire of length L melts and has to be replaced with a wire of the same material and the same resistance. The only wire available has twice the diameter of the broken wire. Which length of the wire should be used? So twice the diameter means that the area will be multiplied by 2 squared for pi r squared, since wires are circular in cross section. So this would be multiplied by 4, and the resistance and area are inversely proportional, so resistance will be divided by 4. In order to return to original resistance, we need to multiply it again by 4 by increasing the length. Length is directly proportional to resistance. So the length must be multiplied by 4 also. So it is 4L. So the answer is D. Question 28 says, a teacher wishes to show the production of electrostatic charges. She holds a rod and drops it with a cotton cloth, a copper rod, a glass rod, a plastic rod, and a steel rod. Which two rods would both be suitable to use? We must use insulating materials, so not copper, not steel. So A, C, and D are rejected. Glass and plastic are both poor conductors, so the answer is B. Question 29 says, two resistors with resistance R1 and R2 are used as a potential divider. What is the relationship between R1, R2, and the potential differences V1 and V2? So in a potential divider or components connected in series, the ratio of resistors is equal to the ratio of voltages. So R1 over R2 is equal to V1 over V2, which we can find actually here. So the answer is D. Question 30 says, the diagram shows a light-dependent resistor connected in a potential divider circuit. The brightness of the light falling on the LDR increases. Which row shows what happens to the resistance of the LDR and what happens to the reading on the voltmeter, which is in parallel to the LDR? So the resistance of the LDR when light increases actually decreases, and the voltmeter reads the potential difference across it. So when this resistance decreases, the potential difference across it also decreases, since resistance is proportional to voltage in series. So the answer here is A. Question 31 says, a simple AC generator has a coil rotating in a magnetic field. What happens to the peak electromotive force and the frequency of the AC output when the coil is rotated faster? So moving the coil faster causes the voltage induced to be greater, and increasing the speed of rotation by definition increases the frequency. So the answer is A. Question 32 says, a current passes along a wire placed between the poles of a permanent magnet. The wire experiences a force due to the magnetic field. What will change the direction of the force? So either replace the poles of the magnets or reverse the current. So increasing the current does not work. Reversing the current, yes. Increasing the strength of the magnetic field, no. Using an electromagnet with the same polarity. So the answer is B, reversing the current. Question 33 says, what is the transformer used for? Changing a direct current into an alternating current? No, that would be a rectifier circuit or a diode. Changing the magnitude of an alternating voltage? Yes. Reducing the frequency? No, it always produces the same frequency. Switching off the current in a circuit when there is a fault? No, that would be the function of a fuse. So the answer here is B. Question 34 says, the scattering of alpha particles by a thin gold foil provides evidence for the nuclear model of the atom. Two alpha particles of the same energy are incident on a nucleus of gold. Which diagram shows the correct path followed by the alpha particles as they pass close to the nucleus? The nucleus is positively charged and the alpha particles are also positively charged, so they would repel, they would not attract, so B and D are incorrect. But the repulsion increases when the distance between the alpha particle and the nucleus decreases, so the one closer to the nucleus would experience more deflection or more repulsion, so the answer is A. Question 35 says, the half-life of carbon-14 is 5,700 years. An object containing carbon-14 has a count rate of 100 counts per minute when it is first formed. The graph shows how the current rate decreases over time. Which point on the graph corresponds to time 11,400 years? So we can divide that by the half-life to know how many half-lives we have. So 11,400 divided by 5,700, that gives 2 half-lives. So this means that the count rate decreased by half to 50 here, and then by half again to 25 here. So this points towards the point D. So this is the answer. Question 36 says, why are beta particles deflected more strongly than alpha particles when they enter an electric field or a magnetic field? Because they are much lighter, they have much less mass. So beta particles have less mass, yes. Beta particles are negatively charged, unrelated. Beta particles have lower velocities. No, they actually move faster. Beta particles have more ionizing power. No, they have less ionizing power. So the answer is A. Question 37 says, which statement describes how nuclear energy is released by fission in a nuclear power station? Fission means the splitting of a heavy nucleus. So atoms join? No, not atoms. Heavy nuclei split into lighter nuclei? Yes. Light nuclei join? That is fusion. Molecules break down? No. So the answer is B. Question 38 says the diagram shows a star S and an initial arrangement of 3 planets X, Y, and Z. Each planet orbits clockwise in a circle about S. The time for one orbit of Y is 3 times the time taken for one orbit of X. The time for one orbit of Z is twice the time taken for one orbit of Y. So Ty is 3 times Tx and Tz is 2 times Ty, which is 6 times Tx. We multiplied 2 by 3. Starting from the initial arrangement, which diagram shows the positions of the planets after X has made one complete orbit. So X returns to original position. That is actually in all choices correct. And for Y, it would travel a third of the complete cycle. So third of the complete cycle would be here. So A and B are correct. C and D are rejected. So this is 120 degrees. That's a third of 360 degrees. And for Z, it is half that, because since the periodic time is longer, it takes less distance to travel in the same time. So if it's twice the time, it is half the distance. So it would be at 60 degrees. So the right choice is in B. Question 39 says the nearest star to the Sun is about 4 light years away from the Earth. A student makes 3 statements about the star. Light from the star takes about 4 years to reach the Earth. That is correct. Light from the Sun takes about 4 years to travel to the star and back. No, that would be 8 years. So this is wrong. The star is outside our galaxy. No, it's inside our galaxy. It is the nearest star and we are in the middle of our own galaxy. So this is wrong. So which statement are correct? One only. So the answer is C. Question 40 says a planet orbits the Sun with orbital period T and the average radius of the orbit is R. What is the average orbital speed of the planet? So distance divided by time. So the circumference of the circular orbit, 2 pi r divided by the periodic time. So the answer is B. So this was the end of the exam. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Keep practicing and I will see you in another video.